All right, all right, all right. I have 10 o'clock here in Colorado, noon on the East Coast, 9 o'clock on the West Coast, and I am pleased and honored and privileged to introduce our next speaker today. Today, we have Mr. Shawn Hollingsworth. Shawn is a retired United States Army Lieutenant Colonel whose career is a masterclass in managing complexity. During his 21 years of service, he has led some of the most critical modernization efforts within the Department of Defense, including the Future Combat Systems Program, where he managed portfolios exceeding $300 million and shaped technology strategies to define modern warfighters' capabilities. Upon transitioning to the civilian sector, Shawn didn't just find a job. He built a powerhouse career at IBM that has now spanned over 15 years. He has evolved from a senior managing consultant into his current role as the Federal Market Cloud Platform Sales Leader. Today, sits at the intersection of national security and cutting edge technology, helping federal agencies transform their operations through artificial intelligence, data science, and cloud services. What makes Shawn's perspective so valuable to everyone here is his deep understanding of both sides of the table. He knows what it's like to be a customer in uniform, and he knows how to lead the solution from the global enterprise. Whether you're interested in project management, federal consulting, the tech industry, or any of you IT guys out there, this is the individual to definitely ask questions for. Shawn is here to share the blueprint for translating your military leadership and understanding into decades plus of success of civilian success. Shawn, thank you very much for your time today. We do greatly appreciate having you here. Welcome to Seven Eagle.
All right. Hey, thanks, Clay. What a
But
wonderful introduction there. Appreciate it.
I am known for my introductions, and especially when there are fellow U.S. Army veterans joining us. I love hosting individuals like you. So I am known for wanting to sit there and ask you your origin story before we get into everything that you do right now. What got you into the United States Army? What got you to raise your right hand and become a officer in the U.S. Army? And what tell us about your life, your time prior to becoming a soldier?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So, my actual thoughts about the U.S. Army were kind of implanted in the blood, so to speak, because my family history literally goes all the way back to the Civil War. And so I had a great grandfather that was one of the original Buffalo Soldiers. I And so there's a lot of history there. We also had three. I had three uncles. My father was also in the military, and he did retire at 20 years. But I had three uncles that were also, when I say military, I am speaking Army here. So that were also in the military and in the Army, and two of those were in a very famous battle. If any of you have read the book We Were Soldiers, Once and Young, in the movie by Mel Gibson, that we were soldiers. That was that famous battle in the Adrain Valley. I had two uncles that were there in that battle. One that was a part of the scouts that were there a week prior, to all hell breaking loose there, right in that valley there. And then another that was a part of that wave of the cav that were coming in and dropping off, soldiers into that grinder, that was LZ X-ray there. And so both of them made it out by the grace of God, out of that thing, but not without, of course, their injuries, as you can imagine. No one goes into a place like that without coming out, with some injuries, but they did survive. So had that history there as well. And again, my own dad was in as well. So when I start thinking about what I was going to do after college, my mind was on the military because it was in the family. But I had a little bit of a detour there in playing football, believe it or not, for a while, and then ended up still, coming into the military, it was just what I was going to do. Was I going to stay in the Army? That was the family history, or potentially look at the Marines. I decided it was going to be the Army. And so in 1989, I entered the MEP Center out in California, which is where I was at the time, and was also on contract. You know how it's written there to go to Ranger School and also to Airborne. And so I ended up at Fort Benning. Yeah, there you go, Airborne. So I ended up at Fort Benning there for my as an infantryman. So I started out in infantry, but I always had an affinity for IT anyway. I'd already kind of started that. I had kind of had a desire for that area of study. And although I was in the infantry, which is a good place to start, or so that was what I was told to me by the person that was helping me through MEPS. Right? It's like, this is what you want to do. You want to start off here. You're probably going to go the officer route. But I was enlisting at the time also. So I enlisted first before I went to what is now, well, may still be called that, the Benning School for Boys, which is OCS. So I enlisted, and I was there at Fort Benning at the 2nd and the 54th. I actually performed the role after a basic in AIT as a drill corporal. Didn't even know such a thing existed, but that's what I did. I was a drill corporal and involved. And while I was actually in basic, I was the platoon guide as well. So they put me in a leadership position there. And then the drill sergeants there were actually very supportive of me and going to OCS and wanting me to go to OCS. Because in their words, they just saw me as what they call officer material. And so I stayed there until it was time to go to OCS, and went through that program. And that was just as Desert Storm was kicking off. So we were rushed through very quickly in that whole period of time, and it was for naught because it was over very quickly. But the intent was to get us through school as quickly as possible, to get us out, to the fight. And then it just didn't end up transpiring. But out of OCS, I actually did a branch. It was kind of like a branch transfer. I was going to stay infantry there for a bit, but ended up having a branch transfer into the IT world, as we would know it on the civilian side. On the military side, that's into signal. So I went into signal and ended up leaving Fort Benning and heading to then Fort Gordon in Augusta to go through SOBC, with Signal Officer Basic Course from there. All right. And then from that point, I ended up out at the 6th Infantry Division, which doesn't exist any longer. But at that time, the 6th Infantry Division was there to protect us against the potential threat across the Bering Strait there. And that was with Russia. But when over time that started to dissipate, we didn't really see the risk there. That particular division downsized to a brigade called the Arctic Support Brigade, just as I was leaving out of that place. But during that time, I went through all the necessary wickets that were required, right? Platoon leader, and I actually ended up with 2 platoons because a lot of people exited the Army after Desert Storm. So I had half the company at that time. And then I left to become a battalion signal officer at the 106th Military Intelligence Battalion there, also in 6th ID, and did work there. My work was lauded there at that place. And so I ended up being positioned as a result for the aide de camp of the Assistant Division Commander for support. And so I actually, believe it or not, turned it down. And there's a story behind why I turned it down. You'd think you got to be crazy because it sets you up for lots of good things. But I happened to know the colonel that was in the position. He was on his way to brigadier general, and I knew him from Fort Benning, believe it or not, because they had selected me while I was in school there to actually become the driver, his driver, while he was there over all the training battalions there at Fort Benning. And so he knew me from going through OCS, and he had taken some of us that were going through OCS and trying to help prepare us to be successful at OCS. And OCS was a lot different then than it is now. OCS was Well, I'll tell you that one of the gentlemen that were one of my, fellow soldiers there going through OCS at that time had been through Ranger School, and he said that OCS was worse than Ranger School. It was
I've
bad. It
heard
was bad.
that. I've
Yeah,
heard that, and
yeah,
that's interesting to hear.
yeah, yeah. It was, and and I'll tell you that it was such hell for us that uh, me and one of my other graduates there was standing outside of the graduation hall as we were getting ready to get sworn in officially, and I said I was just contemplating, reflecting on what we'd just been through, and I said, if someone walked up to me right now with a suitcase with $1 million cash and said, if you'll go back through that, I'll give it to you, I would absolutely say no. And he actually said, I agree. I said, I would turn it down. Absolutely not. I would not go through that again. So in any case, that's how it was then. And I think that it was so very difficult because they thought they were really getting us prepared to go into a protracted war, over in Iraq, and then we were going to need to get used to the kind of chaos and everything else that was going to be associated with it at the time. So, but as my career continued, one of the things that I was given early on was always ensure that you're doing the best, at whatever job that you're doing, right? You're not trying to look good. You're just wanting to be the best at the job that you're doing. So you're not that is a incidental to what it is that you're doing. So when you're doing the job, do the job, right? Do the job to the best of your ability. Do everything you can to learn about it, to become an expert at it, and then everything else will follow. From that point, right? All the other any accolades that you get, any invites that you get, any promotions that you get, and the like will follow as a result of you just being the best at that particular, at that job. And you're always looking at trying to go over and above what is the standard. We all know that from a PT perspective, from a competency perspective, it is always looking to go above and beyond what is just the stated, right, that you have to be at. And that, in fact, was exactly the kind of person that they were looking for to become the aide, which when you become the aide, and we've gone away from the zero defects army, as they call it, or military. I guess it extended some of the other branches as well, but we used to have a zero defects type of policy. And as the aide in particular, even though we had started getting away from that, you were still held accountable for anything that was going on. And it was a lot of pressure there to do things and do it well. So, but as my career was shaping there in Sixth ID, essentially my first assignment, I'd had, two different jobs: platoon leader, battalion signal officer, actually three different jobs, and then also as the aide. Then I had opportunities because I was going to be coming back to go to what's called the captain's career course now, was the advanced course, as we call it then, to prepare you for command. And because of what had happened while I was there in Sixth ID, and I ended up at Fort Gordon for that, I was, I had one of the, that was then, Lieutenant Colonel that was presenting me with opportunity for command while I was in school, for the advanced course. Special approval had to be given from the 1-star that was there, that in order for that to occur, and he was going to be my senior raider. So that was unusual because we were a separate signal battalion. So that was why that occurred. And I kind of contemplated it because at the same time, I don't know if how many of you General Vi or General Farrell from the Army. Well, General Vi was then Lieutenant Colonel Vi at that time. And there was Lieutenant General Farrell was then Major Farrell, and so Major Farrell was trying to get me, into 82nd. Instead of me staying there at Gordon. And so, but it was kind of a challenging thing there because it was kind of, okay, here is a command that's being offered to me right now. And then on the other side, going in with then Major Farrell and Lieutenant Colonel Vi, who would later, of course, be one be a 3-star and the other 4-star. in the battalion there. I was going to go down range, and then I was going to come into the battalion and take over Alpha Company 6, for the Signal Battalion there that he was leading. And my mentor, who was the aide, who I was the aide for in 6th ID, and I had a conversation. I talked with him. I said, "Sir, what do you think? What are your thoughts on doing this?" And so I mentioned this story, though, so that I can also say that one of the things you want to make sure that you do is find a mentor. A lot of you hear about mentors. I used to hear about mentors and everything, and I say, is a mentor really going to be that? I think I've got a pretty good head on my shoulders. I kind of know where I want to go. I have faith that God's going to send me in the right direction. Do I really need a mentor? Do I really need somebody like that and all? And yes, you do. I would say that absolutely someone that you can bounce things off of, who's been there, done that, who's got great experience, knowledgeable, a person who's been successful themselves. And so it's good to have someone like that in your life that you can find. So he and I had this conversation, and he said, "Well, Shawn, you can go down. You can go to 82nd. I've been there." And he said that, but these are different things that can happen. Uh, and um, and so when we had that discussion, I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to take the bird in the hand, right?" I don't know how many of you heard the adage, "A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush." So I was being, offered this command there, right there at Fort Gordon. The colonel I was going to be working for basically said, "I'm going to guarantee you're going to get a great, OER out of this, and you're going to be going to the CGSC, which is of course highly selective as well. Afterwards, to go to Fort Leavenworth at CGSC, Command and General Staff College." And so, as things would go, I would end up being graduated early out of my advanced course and to take command. So my classmates were actually, all the attendees at my command and change ceremony to take over the company, and so that was the way that went. And then as my career progressed, I ended up in different positions, that were involving acquisition, that were also still involving signal, dealing with the requirements that were being levied. I was in the part of the battle lab at Fort Gordon as well, which is where we were bringing in and examining different capabilities that were there. That's a unique environment to be in, because you get exposed to a lot of the different challenges that are part of the Army, but aren't necessarily addressed by the process that has been put in place to address those requirements. We had a very bulky, a very cumbersome system called, the Defense Acquisition Lifecycle Management System, and it had all kinds of milestones, all kinds of regulations and statute that were all integrated into the system, so that it made it kind of difficult to get something into that system and out without it just being antiquated and of no use, because of things moving so fast, especially when you're talking about IT that's connected to it. Um, so that process I was involved in, in uniform, and understanding how it was from the field side. And so when I transitioned from doing that into more of a staff role, where I'm at the more senior level, it was understanding those requirements as they were coming in, and how to then translate those requirements into real life capabilities that were going to help soldiers. So that's where it led me into in a position where I'm actually briefing congressional staffers about the need for the particular capability that we had, why that capability was important, why that we need to keep this on track. Because now you hear me saying this, and it's like, well, so why should someone have to do that? Well, whenever funds are being used, the Army is submitting their POM, the budget essentially for what it is they're going to need. There's a justification, and you'll find that even as you transition out of where you may be now into the commercial arena, if that's where you decide to go, even if you stay on the government side, there's going to be the justification. Sometimes it has to be given. And you need to know why it is that this money has to be spent. What is it that this is doing, and is this really necessary? And so if you can't defend that, then you literally will not get your funding. You'll have to you'll end up having to put something on the shelf or not give soldiers in particular, or it could be airmen, or it could be Marines, or seamen, whoever it is. It's the same process, what they need. And so my role as a Department of Army System Coordinator during that time was to represent a portfolio. Mine was a multi-billion-dollar portfolio that I had to not only the Army staff, which is the gentlemen and the ladies that would be walking around the halls of the Pentagon with stars on their shoulders, and it would be multiple stars, or to Congress. And so that was very important to again know the product that you're representing, know how to explain everything from A to Z on it. And in my case, with respect to those that I had, I'd have to know everything about the product, about why it's there, what congressional district it sits in, is it Republican or Democrat, how many jobs is it creating, what's the amount of spend, what's the budget on it, is rather the funding cycle on it, why is there this spike in such and such month and everything. You have to be able to explain all these kinds of things. So I only mention those things only because that is a continuing kind of thing. It's kind of like when you're in school, whether it's in college or other type of school that's trying to teach you a particular specialty or discipline, and you think sometimes you'll never use it, right? But what I have found is that those skills and those things that I have been learning or was being exposed to started showing up in environments like that, because I did need to have some sort of structured way of understanding these different concepts and what was going on, and how to explain those and communicate those in a way that doesn't cost us. In some cases, it could cost you millions of dollars if you can't explain it, because it wasn't one of those situations where I'll get back to you. Unfortunately, when you're speaking to a congressional staffer, that doesn't happen. You have to have it right the first time. And I'll tell you that in the transition from the military into the civilian, or say it's commercial world. If you go on the commercial side, and I can talk to why I went commercial versus government, that you're going to need to know, you're going to need to have the facts readily at hand. You're going to get an interview when you're going into a company, an organization that you may be representing, and this is on the commercial side more so. You're having an interview essentially when you get that meeting, and when you are talking to them about what's going on, you need to have a command of the facts, understand everything about what's going on, and then assume that you'll never ever get another opportunity unless you present it right. And so you've got to have all that together, right? And not just assume that they're going to give you another meeting, because if the interview, so to speak, doesn't go well, and I'm not meaning you're interviewing for a job, I mean that that we're past the job phase. That you've gotten into the job, and you're now presenting yourself. You're going to have it. Now, if we back up a step and look at it from the perspective of getting ready for the position, in all, I kind of went through what it is that I had done, and what level that took me to, and how that kind of prepared me for how I transitioned. Um, the the one piece of this that I'll mention too before going there is about education. So there's pros and cons about the type of degrees that you get nowadays. In my case, I had two different degrees. Well, and I don't count my bachelor's, two different master's degrees that are focused on the areas of expertise that I have. One in defense acquisition, and I obtained one at Webster's University. Many of you are probably familiar with it, being in the military, while I was in the Command and General Staff College. And I obtained one that was in procurement and acquisition management, master's. So it was a Master of Arts. Now, before that, I had obtained a master's that was not associated with Webster's. It was Mercer University out of Atlanta, actually, while I was in uniform. I was actually in command during that time. And that one was in technology management, Master's of Science in Technology Management. And so it had to do, those were very focused on the areas that I was involved in, both, career wise, meaning, signal, information technology. The other was focused on procurement and acquisition management was another, which I did get certified at DIWEA level 3. And DIWEA is Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act. I know, actually it's a long name to describe it. You get certified at the Defense Acquisition University for how to actually procure or acquire, products and or services for the government. And level 3 comes with both a school requirement and a years in the job requirement. So it's like probably 15, I think 15 or so years of actual experience, and then the actual job itself in what you do there getting into the school and applying it, to the various exams that you'd have there, presentations that you have to make. But so all of that are things that I had to, ensure that I had in place in all as I'm transitioning and getting ready to, to go forward into something else. And all I wanted to leverage that. And then it came to the time when I had to start looking at, as I transition, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to stay government, or do I want to go commercial? And I was weighing the options to try to see, okay, yeah, I know I can go to a number of different agencies, probably stay in the DoD, since that's a place, that I'm comfortable with, I know. So I can look at something like that, or I can go with an IT company, because that's something I really enjoy doing, is IT. So I looked at both, and I actually ended up getting offers from both, to take different roles in the like. And so I ended up selecting IBM, and it was a strange thing, because the way that I started searching, just as I was thinking about, I had already set a retirement date, and it was right at 22 years when I got out, but it was set a retirement date. I started looking for different career fairs. Okay, what do I do? How do I get there? And that kind of thing. And so I go to this career fair that's sponsored by an organization called MOA. It's the Military Officers Association of America. Now, MOA, by its name, it kind of, is Officers Association, but MOA invites anyone, who is transitioning to go to their career fairs. And at the time, those career fairs were always held at the Washington Convention Center that's there in DC. Quite a large event. I mean, you can just think of all the major organizations or federal executive agencies just about would be there, along with, quite a few, commercial entities. And it was there that as I was walking on the floors of, the convention center with about 30 copies of my resume, in hand, of course, all the things I'd done in the military, my education and the like, that I'm talking with different organizations. And then I start seeing these signs, and I see Target, and I see Walmart, and I see, Amazon, right? I see names that aren't to me familiar, because I'm thinking, what in the world are they doing here? What interest do they have in a military that is transitioning? I said to myself. And then as I start to walk around and I talk to some of these, and I kind of get an idea of what's going on and what they're looking for, and the like, I see one for IBM. And IBM's got this little booth, this little small booth. I mean, it's a tiny one. It's like the least expensive one you can probably get. And the guy there looks like he's lost, And I walk up, and I said, "What in the world is IBM doing here?" And he said, "Well, honestly, I'll tell you, I'm a recruiter, but I wasn't given a whole lot of information about this particular event. But I did want to say that IBM is looking for transitioning military, and so do you have a resume?" I said, "Yeah, here you go." And I said, "Well, I can talk you through it real quick." And so here is where you're going to want to have your what you've heard before, 30-second elevator pitch, or you can just give a few minutes if that's what it is that they're willing to afford you to talk about what you are. There was no line there or anything in this case. I just figured, okay, I've talked to Target, I've talked to Amazon, why not just talk to IBM here, because I'd not interfaced with them at all while I was in uniform, and I was in procurement and acquisitions. I didn't know what their particular space was in the DoD. So I mentioned some of the things that I'd already mentioned to you guys, in particular DIWEA certification. He says, "What? DIWEA? Did you say DIWEA?" And I said, "Yes, DIWEA." And so he said, "There's an interest that they've told me that I need to look for," and that was one of them. And I said, "Okay, well, great, fantastic." And all. So we were done, and I go on my way to talk to others and the like. And then 3 weeks later, I think it was maybe 2, 3 weeks later, I'm outside cutting grass, and I actually get a call, and I'd completely forgotten that I'd even talked to them. And they call me in on a Friday and say, "Hey, can you come in? This is 5 o'clock on a Friday." I think that's an odd time to call and come in for an interview. In any case, did come in. They had everyone set up, really 3 levels up, as far as interview. And having left the building, I was already told they were going to definitely be making an offer. And they did pretty quickly. We negotiated on the offer. And I will tell you also that as you are transitioning, and you do find, if you're going on the commercial side, that you get an offer and you have already done a little bit of research about what your particular skill set should be worth outside, then you make sure that you get that plus whatever percentage that you determine that you believe that you should get. Right. But if you're looking at what you're currently making now, and you at least want to make something more than that, then you want to tack something onto that to make sure that you get what you want. Don't get in the door and say, "I'm just going to work towards promotion and get increases from that perspective." That may work with some, but it definitely does not work with all. And I would say that you want to come in and not regret that you didn't ask for more when you were negotiating on what you want, if you're certain that they do want you. Okay. So that was my experience, and how I made the transition, from Army, using the skill sets that I had there into the commercial environment. And it certainly was, at least for me, it was the right decision, because from a financial perspective, I was able to do a lot more than I would have had I stayed on the government side. And even if I'd have maxed out, for instance, even in an SES role somewhere, I wouldn't have been able to get close to what I've been able to do on the commercial side. So that's one of the things about that. But if you want to go to a more familiar environment and you go to the government side and work there, just understand that there are limitations from a financial perspective to what you can make. There is, for the most part, job security there. uh, I don't know of any place where you can't depend on there just being job security. Yeah, on the government side, if you get into a position there and the environment, you're familiar, others around you, they're familiar, and all of what you're doing. But just understand that if that is one of your goals, is to set yourself up a little bit, better financially, it's probably going to be that you'd want to go on to the commercial side of things. So that's kind of the story there that I have. There's some other details that I could share and the like, but that's how I transitioned and positioned myself before going on, making that transition into the civilian world. And then what I'm still, even doing now, still doing the same thing, here at IBM, and very pleased, so far with what I have, been able to accomplish here. And that's pretty much all I have for now. I certainly, Clay, would like to open it up for any questions anyone might have. I
You
did see a
know,
question. I did see a question earlier that I wanted to address. So I saw it pop up on the screen. Someone asked a question about I think a Rear Admiral Vi of the Navy. No, this was a Army General Vi, and he's a 4-star. Actually, finished his career at Army Materiel Command. Okay. All right. Go
Fantastic.
ahead. Mm-hmm.
Love the detail. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
All right, before I go on with some of my questions, team, who has questions for Shawn? Nicholas, why am I not surprised? Go ahead, sir. Nicholas?
Might help if I hit the unmute button. Sorry about that. So first, appreciate the story. It's awesome. Your heritage goes all the way back to the Civil War. That's pretty amazing. So my question for you, sir, is so I'm shaping my next chapter around leading in AI-driven environments. I'm sure as mostly everybody's
Mm-hmm.
going to have to. Just not technically, but I'm also just thinking from a strategical and ethical level for that. So you've been operating at a level where, signal to noise is a clear rate, like you're able to see through the smoke, if you will, seeing at the level that you've been operating at. If you were advising someone that's trying to be in that space building within the next 5 to 10 years, what would you have them focus on now? I really value your insight because you're literally at the epitome of that.
So when you say in that space, could you define that again? I know you mentioned about there being a focus on AI and all, but when you say that space, I just want to make sure you get it. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. So for the governance and compliance space within the AI realm right now,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's running to it, and then you have Claudebot come out and all
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
threat actors, right? I've been in the cyberspace
Mm-hmm.
for 15 plus years, like actual cyber stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to get your pulse on that. And then if you
Yeah.
were to advise around that, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that is as far as what you'd be doing right now, I would say, is getting smart in that space. Now, the IBM recognized that when you talk about governance and compliance early on with respect to AI, because of how AI is now being used. So you look at there is no governance on it. There isn't any particular, we talk about ethical AI and the like, but I mean, it's kind of like the song, Who Let the Dogs Out, right? I mean, it's kind of run amok out there, and the wild, wild west with respect to how information is being poured in and then what is being spit out on the other side. And even though some of the developers of the major AI tools that are there are saying that there's less percentages of what's called hallucinations happening right now, and hallucinations are essentially just not true. It's the AI filling in blanks on answers to things that is not true. And so when you are using something that's just open and there's no governance around it, there's no analysis of what's being poured in it, it can be very dangerous, with the answers that are given back. So in the space of how to especially future proof yourself for the future, it's learning more about how to help those who are in that place of trying to wrangle right, that whole governance and compliance situation. Because what most want, and it's something that IBM happens to have done some time ago, was to ensure that data that is being used within an enterprise is only the enterprise's data. It's not coming from external. It's the enterprise's data that's being used, and so they can know that there is a certain foundation of truth that's there. But any data sets that they need to access that are external to their internal data sets is curated. So there's a governance that's wrapped around it, and that takes work and effort and human interaction, human expertise to actually do that. All right, so that means that as far as positioning yourself in a good place with respect to AI, is definitely looking at looking at the education that's available and any organizations that are going to be working on that whole governance piece, because it is very important going forward to ensure that that's done right. So a lot of folks are really concerned about AI taking away jobs, and it is. That's just the absolute fact. It is absolutely eliminating certain jobs. But then those particular individuals who are being released because those jobs, are ones that AI can do, ideally would have already been preparing themselves, like it sounds like you're doing, for the kind of work that has to take place in order to ensure that you don't have, serious issues in the future. Does that help answer your question?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Fantastic. Jeremy, go ahead, sir.
Well, Shawn, appreciate your blood for its service. Your blood is more of the
Mm-hmm.
American history at this point,
Well,
literally.
mm-hmm.
Thanks for coming to talk to us. I wanted to hear more about your IT background, like within what you did, like the contrast between what you did as an army officer and versus the civilian life in IBM. Because I know you're not exactly like the technical guy specifically at IBM, from what I've heard, but I just wanted to see what the contrast was like because I'm also
Yeah.
going from army IT to civilian world IT.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So in the Army, right, my role as a signal guy, if you're familiar with what signal guys and gals do, in the Army and in the other services, it's called a little something different, but it still, has to do with IT, was the battlefield networks, right? It's you're making sure that you're putting together what the network is going to look like for any given scenario. Like, so when we're doing exercises, or if you're going off to support either a peace operation, or if it's otherwise into the actual war, there is a network that has to be designed, and so you have to figure out what the assets are that you have. And back then we used to have what's called small extension nodes, large extension nodes, and there was connectivity between those. And then we also had satellite traffic. We had different types of data, as far as TS and secret data that's out there on the battlefield. There's ways that had to be handled as well, and different sorts of encryption devices and things like that. And that's all the job that I had to ensure was put together, before that we, did anything, was put that together, lay that plan out in front of the boss and say, okay, this here is how I've planned to make sure that we can all communicate, not only with ourselves, but also with those that are extended. So it was a very hands-on, type of a role, even out there fooling with wires, right? And everything. It wasn't, even though I had soldiers that were doing jobs, I could get out there and do what they're doing as well. So now transitioning that into the IT world of what it is that I do now, you do have to be somewhat technical, but not technical to the point that you have to know all the all the details of how it is that you install a particular type of software, or is it going on VMware, or is it going to use OpenShift, or is it a combination of both? And what size server do you need to have, and how much RAM and all that kind of thing. Those are all important things. I don't have to know it to that level, but I need to know about those things, right? And what that means as I transition in to this world. Again, I mentioned earlier about being an expert in the area that you are working. And so even though I'm not the one that's hands on doing those kinds of things, I need to know enough about it so that I can convey that information, to a client or a potential client, so that they can understand it. Now, I have technical help. That's the way that we're organized here, that can actually go in with me and describe some of the very detailed type things, that have to be discussed at a technical level. But the transition from the Army's way of doing IT and the requirements, of the battlefield, and then what I do now is a bit is different. It is different in the way that we do it, but you still keep the core tenets of knowing the technology, what the technology does, how you support that technology is still something that you have to do. Does that help to answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That does.
Mhm. Okay, great. Mhm.
Mr. Keith, go ahead, sir.
Good morning. Well, I really appreciated learning all about your family history going way back. It's very fascinating. The company you now work for, IBM, also has a very long and very fascinating history. It's been around ever since I was born. My parents got stock into it for me, and I've even had like IBM personal PCs growing up. So I'm sure they also know a lot about the growing tech field and when newer technologies come out, as well as from competitors. So did you learn just as much about adaptability from IBM just as you did being in the military?
Oh yeah, I mean, in fact, I think that so in the military, there's I mean, all of us here. I mean, I'm thinking a lot that are here. I'm assuming are coming from the military. So that adaptability that you have to have. Well, for instance, you may have heard this old uh, saying that was that your plans, your operations order and everything, they survive, the first shot, within the actual fight. So you go out and there's some things that you had planned to do that you anticipated based upon what you know about the enemy and the like. But as soon as the bullets start flying, as soon as the bombs start going off, there's immediately adjustments that have to be made. And so, in the same way, when you're here on the civilian side, you have things like that happen. And so, you have to understand how to adapt, to the environment that you're in, because everything changes just a little bit. It's not always the same. It's not a cookie cutter thing. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And is it more harder to adapt in the civilian world than it is in the military?
No, I would say in some cases, depending on what you've done in the military, it's easier,
Right.
right? Sometimes things can be very, very complicated in the military side. I mean, people lose their mind sometimes over things that I would look at and say, "Oh my God, nobody's dying here," right? No, no, there's we'll get to it. We'll solve the problem. There is an answer to the problem, but you cannot get to it if you're overly I'm going to say emotional. You're overly emotional. You're letting things kind of skew what it is that you need to get done in, say, a short period of time, or how to address a situation that's happening, which it does happen on the commercial side as well. You don't always have a lot of time for for getting in front of a client and presenting certain information. So, yeah,
Well, thank you very much.
you're welcome.
All right, Percy, go ahead, sir.
Again, Shawn, thanks you for all the information. And I'm kind of like looking at your LinkedIn and how you're a cloud sales specialist and all your background. It's kind of relating to your previous question, the question before. What makes you more marketable to go into that role? I mean, I have like Sec Plus and IT background for the past 4 years, but I am trying to
Mhm.
transition into a cloud sales, basically be a sales.
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
can make me more marketable and just have an edge?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer because the what they're looking for now may be a little bit different than when I came in. So when I came in, and there's a one piece I left out of when I started with IBM and that interview process I mentioned that occurred, is that happened as a result of a contract that we had with OSD AT&L, the Office of Secretary of Defense for Acquisition Technology and Logistics. Um, we had won a contract, or let's say it was IBM had won a contract, and they were looking for bodies to actually um, fill the roles there, project manager and the like. And so, since I was obviously uh, I had certifications, for an acquisition PM and the like, in the Army, and had done the job in the Army, that allowed me to be aligned with what they needed for that particular opportunity, that particular contract. And so I was hired to actually come on to that contract and perform that role. But it wasn't just for that contract, because you have companies, this particular smaller companies, that will hire you for a very specific role, for a very specific skill set that you have. And if you're not on that contract, you probably don't have a job. Within IBM, and the reason why I chose IBM was because of its size. There are a lot of different places that you can go. And so by virtue of that, they hire a skill set and not just hiring a skill for a contract. So that means that your skill set can be applied a lot of different places. So in preparing yourself, I would say that the best thing to do is to, have a skill set, certifications in particular. And I want to stop my foot on that, on certifications in certain areas, because the previous CEO that we had decided that IBM would no longer require that those coming in had to have a college degree. That if you had essentially had a high school diploma or a GED equivalent, and you met the requirements of that job role, right, that was there, then you're good. You don't have to have a degree. And the reason why that is because they found that there were a lot of individuals who are very skilled that did not have college degrees, but had the certifications and the experience that could allow them to do the job that we needed them to do. And so as a result, they removed that requirement. So I would say that you'd want to just have a skill set that is applicable across a variety of different, needs, in an organization. That's going to be one of the best things you can do as far as positioning yourself. Does that help?
Yep. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Well, fantastic. Well, Shawn, we are actually out of time.
Okay.
So I do want to sit there and thank you for your insight, your experience, your transition, everything that you have done through your whole entire career to get you to IBM. So I do want to open it up to you. Any closing thoughts, any closing words of advice for everyone here?
Yeah, I think that what I would say, I think I pretty much kind of said all the things I think you need to focus on when you're, when you're transitioning. The thing is don't just jump on the first thing smoking. I would say that. Don't get overly excited about just jumping in on a job just because they're making you an offer. Take your time and make sure that you're getting with a company that is that's got some legs, right? You can look for a small company, but they may not make it, or you may not. You'll only be there as long as the contract is there. And I have seen many that I particularly observed over time that will just go from job to job to job, right? And it's just like, my gosh, right? If you've been used to, for instance, just being in one place and being able to continue to move, advance yourself within that environment, then that's normally going to be one of the larger companies that you want to try to get with. And once you get there, is to stay there. Don't keep, unless you're going to move to another like company that can allow you to move around, literally, not only within, say, geographically the U.S., but also even if they have opportunities to go overseas. Because, for instance, right now, if I wanted to, just like within the military, if I wanted to take a role that was over in another country, I could have. Right. And it'd be great, to find a company that can, that have those kind of legs that can allow you to be able to have that kind of mobility and move around. And again, as I just mentioned with the previous question, just to have a skill set that can move with you. So that's the thing I would want to, as far as parting advice, don't just jump on the first thing that's there, right? Because then what happens is you find something that you really want and you're out of there. You move on to the next thing and the like. And, and if you keep making those kind of not really thoughtful decisions, then you could find yourself continuing to do that. So I'd say make a really, really good decision about where you want to go, and examine the company, find out what it is that they're doing in the space, figure out how that aligns with what is going to be going on, in the marketplace at large. If you're going commercial, again, this is commercial, and I'm not speaking to those who want to go ahead and stay with government and the like, but just be very thoughtful about that. And that's probably the last thing I'd like to say, Clay. I appreciate the time. And I certainly wish all of you the best, in moving forward into, this new world that you'll be coming to. Of course, I had been in a whole different world, for near 22 years before transitioning into the civilian side. But the transition was pretty easy for me, and was able to just continue on from there. Mhm.
Well, fantastic, sir. I do
Mhm.
want to say thank you for your time. Do greatly appreciate it. And having someone from the powerhouse that is IBM here has been a massive honor and privilege. So, Shawn Hollingsworth from IBM and the Federal Market Cloud Services Platform sales team, sir, thank you from the bottom of my heart, from all of us here at Seven Eagle for your time today. We do greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Best of luck to all.